So today I'm going to read from The Age of Fable, Bullfinch's Mythology. This is a Guild America book that I found at Goodwill years ago. And so I'm going to try something. Instead of picking a story, I'm just going to open the book because there's like 60 or maybe 65 stories in here, like short stories. So I'm going to just open up the book and see what's here. Just give it a good. I want to start two in the middle. Don't want to get the table of contents. Let's see. All right. Okay. And this is actually a story I'm familiar with. Jason and the Golden Fleece. So this is page 135, chapter 17. It appears maybe. So let's see what we got here. Jason and the Golden Fleece. Medea and Aeson. In very ancient times, there lived in Thessaly a king and queen named Artemis and Nephil. They had two children, a boy and a girl. After a time, Artemis grew indifferent to his wife, put her away, and took another. Nephil suspected danger to her children from the influence of the stepmother and took measures to send them out of her reach. Mercury assisted her and gave her a ram with a golden fleece, on which she set the two children, trusting that the ram would convey them a place of safety. The ram vaulted into the air with the children on his back, taking his course to the east, till when crossing the strait that divides Europe and Asia, the girl whose name Hel fell from his back into the sea, which from her he was called the Hellespont, now the Dardanelles. The ram continued his career until he reached the kingdom of Colchis on the eastern shore of the Black Sea. When he safely landed, the boy Phyrex, who hospitably received Aetes, king of the Golden Country. Phyrex sacrificed the ram to Jupiter and gave the golden fleece to Aetes, who placed it in a consecrated grove under the care of the sleepless dragon. There was another kingdom in Thessaly, near to that Artemis, and ruled over by the relative of his. The king Aeson, being tired of the cares of government, surrendered his crown to his brother Peleus on a condition that he should hold it only during the minority of Jason, the son of Aeson. When Jason was grown up and came to demand the crown from his uncle, Peleus pretended to be willing to yield it, but at the same time suggested that the young man the glorious adventure of going in the quest of the Golden Fleece, which it was well known in the kingdom of Colchis, and as Peleus pretended, the rightful property of their family. Jason was pleased with the thought and forthwith made preparations for the expedition. At that time, The only species of navigation known to the Greeks consisted of small boats or canoes hollowed out from the trunks of trees, so that when Jason employed Argus, a gigantic undertaking, it was accomplished. However, and the vessel to all adventurous young men of Greece, and soon found himself at the head of a band of youths, many of whom afterwards were renowned among the heroes and demigods of Greece. Hercules, Theseus, Orpheus, and Nestor were among them. They are called the Argonauts from the name of their vessel. The Argo, with their crew of heroes, left the shores of Thessaly, having touched at the island of Lemnos. Thence crossed to Mysia, thence to Thrace. Here they were found the sage Phineus, and from him received instruction as to their future course. It seems the entrance of the Euxine Sea was impeded by two small rocky islands, which floated on the surface, and in their tossings and heavings occasionally came together, crushing and grinding to atoms any object that might be caught between them. They were called Symplegades, or clashing islands. Phineus instructed the Argonauts how to pass the dangerous strait. When they reached the islands, they let go of a dove, which took her way between rocks and passed in safely. Only losing some feathers on her tail, Jason and his men seized a favorable moment of the rebound, peeled their oars with vigor, and passed safe through the islands closed behind them. Though the islands closed behind them, and actually grazed their stern, they now rowed along the shore till they arrived at the eastern end of the sea and landed in the kingdom of Colchis. Jason made known his message to the Colchian king, Aeetes, who sent to give up the Golden Fleece if Jason would yoke to the plow two fire-breathing bulls with brazen feet, and so the teeth of the dragon which Cadmus had slain, and from it was well known that a crop of armed men will spring up, who would turn their weapons against their producer. Jason accepted the conditions, and a time was set for the making of the experiment. Previously, however, he found means to plead his case to Medea, daughter of the king. He promised her marriage, and as they stood before the altar of Hecate, called the goddess to witness his oath. Medea yielded, and by her aid, for she was a potent sorceress, he was furnished with a charm by which he could encounter safely the breath of a fire-breathing bull and weapons of armed men. At the time, the people assembled at the grove of Mars, and the king assumed his royal seat, while multitude covered the hillsides. The brazen-footed bulls rushed in, breathing fire from their nostrils that burned the herbage as they passed. The sound was like the roar of a furnace, and the smoke like that water upon quick lime. Jason advanced boldly to meet them. His friends, the chosen heroes of Greece, trembled to behold him. Regardless of the burning breath, he soothed their rage with his voice, patted their necks with fearless hand, and adroitly slipped over them the yoke. and compelled them to drag the plow. Colchians were amazed. The Greeks shouted for joy. Jason next proceeded to sow the dragon's teeth and plow them in. And soon the crop of armed men sprang up, wonderful to relate. No sooner had they reached the surface, had they begun to brandish their weapon and rush upon Jason. The Greeks trembled for their hero, and even she, who had provided him a way of safety and taught him how to use it, Medea herself, grew pale with fear. Jason for a time kept his assailants at bay with his sword and his shield, till finding their numbers overwhelming, he resorted to the charm which Medea had taught them, seized a stone and threw it into the midst of his foes. Then they immediately turned their arms against one another, and soon there was not one of the dragon's brood left alive. The Greeks embraced their hero. Medea, if she dared, would have embraced him too. It remained to lull to sleep the dragon that guarded the fleece, and this was done by scattering over him a few drops of preparation which Medea had supplied. At the smell, he relaxed his rage, stood for a moment motionless, and then shut those great brown eyes that had never been known to shut before, and turned over on his side, fast asleep. Jason seized the fleece, and with his friends and Medea accompanying, hastened their vessel before Aestes, the king, could arrest their departure, and made the best of their way back to Thessaly, where they arrived safe, and Jason delivered the fleece to Peleus and dedicated the Argo to Neptune. What became of the fleece afterwards we do not know, but perhaps it was found after all, like many of the golden prizes, not worth the trouble it had cost to procure it. This is one of those mythological tales, says a late writer, in which there is reason to believe the substrain of truth exists, though overlaid by a massive fiction. It's probably what the first important maritime expedition, and like the first attempts of the kind of all nations as we know them from history, was probably a half practical character. If rich spoils were the result, it was enough to give rise to the idea of the Golden Fleece. Another suggestion of a learned mythologist, Bryant, is that a corrupt tradition of a story of Noah and the Ark. The name, the Argo, seems to countenance this, and the incident of the dove is another confirmation. Pope, in his ode on Saint Cecilia's Day, thus celebrates the launching of the ship Argo and the power of the music of Orpheus, whom he calls the Thracian. So when the bold vessel dared to seize, high on the stern, Thracian raised his strain, while Argo saw her kindred trees descend from Pelion to the main. Transported demigods stood round, and men grew heroes at the sound. In Dyer's poem of the Fleece, there's an account of the ship Argo and her crew, which she gives good picture in primitive maritime adventure. From every region of Aegea's shore, the brave assemble, those illustrious twins, Castor and Pollux, Orpheus, tuneful bard, Zestius and Callias, as the wind and speed, strong Hercules and many a chief renowned. On deep Iolcos, sandy shore they thronged, gleaming in armor, ardent of exploits. And soon the Lord cored in the huge stone, uplifting to the deck, unmoored the bark, whose keel of wondrous length the skillful hand of the Argus fashioned for the proud attempt, and the exhausted keel of lofty mast, unpraised in sails full swelling, to the chiefs, unwanted objects. Now, first, now they learned, the bolder steerage over ocean wave, led by the golden stars of Chiron's art, had marked the sphere celestial. Hercules left the expedition to Mysia, for Helios, a young beloved by him, had gone for water, was laid hold of, and kept by the nymphs of the spring, who were fascinated by his beauty. Hercules went in quest of the lad, and while he was absent, the Argo put to sea and left him. Moore, in one of his songs, makes a beautiful allusion to this incident. When Helios was sent with his urn to the fount, through fields of light, and with his heart full of play, light rambled the boy over meadow and mount, and neglected his task for the flowers in the way. Thus, many like me, who in youth should have tasted the fountain that runs philosophy's shrine, their time with the flowers on the margin have wasted, and left their light urns all as empty as mine. Medea and Aeson. Amid the rejoicings of the recovery of the Golden Fleece, Jason, that one thing was wanting, the presence of Aeson his father, who was prevented by age and infirmities from taking a part in them. Jason said to Medea, my spouse, would that your arts, whose power I have seen so mighty for my aid, could do for me my further service. Take some years from my life and add them to my father's. Medea replied, not at such cost shall it be done, but if my art avails me, his life should be lengthened without abridging yours. The next full moon she issued forth alone, while all creatures slept, not a breath stirred the foliage, and all was still. The stars she addressed her incantations, and to the moon, to Hecate, the goddess of the underworld, and to Telos, the goddess of the earth, by whose power plants potent for enchanting are produced. She invoked the gods of the woods and the caverns, and the mountains and the valleys, of the lakes and the rivers, and the winds and the vapors. While she spoke, the stars shone brighter, and presently chariot descended, through the air drawn by flying serpents. She ascended it, and born she knew how to select for her purpose. 9 nights plants grew. She ascended it and bore aloft, made her way to distant regions, where potent plants grew, which she knew how to select for her purpose. 9 nights she employed in her search, and during that time came not within the doors of her palace, nor under any roof, and shunned all intercourse with mortals. She next erected 2 altars, the one to Hecate and the other to Hebe, the goddess of youth, and sacrificed the black sheep. Pouring libations of milk and wine, she implored Pluto and his stricken bride that they would not hasten to take an old man's life. Then she directed that Aeson should be led forth, and having thrown him into a deep sleep by a charm, laid on a bed of herbs like one dead. Jason and all the others were kept away from the place, that no profane eyes might look upon her mysteries. Then with streaming hair she thrice moved round the altars, dipped flaming twigs in the blood, and laid thereupon to burn. Meanwhile, the cauldron with its contents was got ready. In that she put magic herbs, with seeds and flowers of acrid juice, stones from the distant east, and sand from the shore all surrounding ocean, hoar, frost gathered by moonlight, a screeched owl's head and wings, and the entrails of a wolf. She added the fragments of the shell of tortoises and the liver of stags, animals tenacious of life, and the head of a beak of a crow. The outline 9 generations that outlives 9 generations of men. These with many other things without a name, she boiled together for her purpose work, stirring them up with a dry olive branch. And behold, the branch, when taken out instantly, became green, and before long was covered with leaves and plentiful growth of young olives. And as the liquor boiled and bubbled, and sometimes ran over, the grass wherever the sprinklings fell short forth with a verdure like that of spring. Seeing all that was ready, Medea cut the throat of the old man and let out his blood, and poured into his mouth and into his womb the juices of her cauldron. As soon as she had completely imbibed them, his hair and beard laid their whiteness and assumed the blackness of youth. And assumed the blackness of youth. His paleness and emaciation were gone. His veins were full of blood, and his limbs of vigor and robustness. Aeson was amazed at himself, and remembers that such as now he was in his youthful days, 40 years before. Medea used her arts for a good purpose, but not so in another instance, where she made them the instruments of revenge. Pelias, our readers will recollect, was the usurping uncle of Jason, and had kept him out of his kingdom. Yet he must have had some good qualities, for his daughters loved him, and when they saw what Medea had done for Aeson, they wished her to do the same for their father. Medea pretended to consent, and prepared her cauldron as before. At her request, an old sheep was brought and plunged into the cauldron. Very soon, a bleeding heart was in the kettle, and when the cover was removed, a lamb jumped forth, ran frisking away into the meadow. The daughters of Peleus saw the experiment with delight, and appointed a time for their father to undergo the same operation. But Medea prepared her cauldron for him in a different way. She put in a water and a few simple herbs. In the night, she, with the sisters, entered the bedchamber of the old king, while he and his guards slept soundly under the influence of the spell cast upon them by Medea. The daughters stood by the bedside with their weapons drawn, but hesitated to strike, till Medea chid their irresolution. Then turning them away their faces and giving them random blows, they smote him with their weapons. He then started for his sleep, cried out, "My daughters, what are you doing? Why you kill your father? Will you kill your father?" Their hearts failed them, and their weapons fell from their hands. But Medea struck him a fatal blow, and prevented his saying more. They placed him in the cauldron, and Medea hastened to depart in her serpent-drawn chariot before they discovered her treachery, or her vengeance would have been terrible. She escaped, however, but had little enjoy of the fruits of her crime. Jason, for whom she had done so much, wishing to marry Chrysaea, princess of Corinth, put away Medea. She, enraged at his ingratitude, called on the gods for vengeance. She sent a poison robe as a gift to the bride, and then killing her own children and setting a fire to the place, mounting her serpent-drawn chariot, and fled to Athens, where she married King Agus, the father of Theseus. And we shall meet her again when we come to the adventures of that hero. The incantations of Medea will remind the reader of those of the witches in Macbeth. The following lines are those which seem most strikingly to recall the ancient model. And that is the end of the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece. Kind of feeling it, kind of not feeling it. Really felt like it really wasn't even about the Golden Fleece, low key. I'm really not even knowing how they was even going with that